All right. Hello, everyone. This is William from the Duel Commander Rules Committee. Here today to talk with you about our 2023 panel regarding the state of Duel Commander. This is going to be a quite long video, like several hours, and we're going to review a certain number of things. This video now follows what we've been doing last year and what we intend to do next year, 2024, as the filming on this video. So, for those who were not fully aware of what we did last year, but who are still interested in Duel Commander, please just note that we did another video like this last year that lasted some 2 hours and something, I think. That's on my account as well. It's on the website, the mtg.info website, and you can find this video at this. I will put this QR code, but I will just put it into the video with thumbnails, so you can find it straight on YouTube. So don't bother finding it. Last year's video contained a lot of things. We talked about the history of Magic, the history of Duel Commander before 2022. We talked about the banned and restricted list. We talked about the committee and how we function, who we are, how many we are, and where we come from. We talked about announcements. We talked about the websites, and we reviewed quite a lot of statistics, different statistics coming from pretty much everywhere. Stats about the BNR, notably. We talked about cards and economy when it comes to playing Duel Commander. We talked about the demography of players, which we're going to talk about this year once again, and about top performing decks and events, and the population of people playing Duel Commander worldwide, which we will do this year again, and probably every year. So this is the only slide I will keep from last year updated. So far, right now in the committee, we have 4 core members who decide for everything, who take all the decisions, including the structuration of the Duel Commander Rules Committee. We have 4 advisors, who are mostly here for guidance. Could be anyone who's able to work as a team, who's willing to help and consider as a reliable person. So could be a player, could be a judge, could be a tournament organizer, could be anyone that's who's involved into Magic, and especially into Duel Commander. We have 8 regional coordinators worldwide. These people create some linking matter between places that are too distant for us to reach abroad, for geographic reasons, for linguistic reasons, for pretty much all kind of reasons. We have to be unfortunately separated from people all over the world, so we try to get some exchanges with those people, and we try to increase that number. And there's one technical advisor who does stuff like this that you're watching right now, and hello, it's me. The main question this year, 2023, after the recent events we have witnessed, is to understand where Magic the Gathering is going. Because that settles where Duel Commander is going. So I cannot tell you what's going to happen in the future, but I can give you some hints to detect and deceive and plan some trajectories. So first of all, I did this little selective history of Magic the Gathering. So, some place a long time ago, in the middle of the United States, 30 years ago, Richard Garfield presented with Atkinson, Garfield, the whole team of people at the very early ages of Wizards of the Coast, presented for the first time the first prints, the Belgian prints from Magic the Gathering, the original game fair, and this sold out quite recently, quite rapidly. You know, everything was just a blast. It was just sold so fast they couldn't print fast enough. So moving on, we just had the first million cards printed, the first major rules update, and the creation of the banned and restricted 1 year later. And then we just had, for the first time, constricted play being split across more than one format. Then we have the first release of the comprehensive rules that we all know today and use today. Mirage was the first set to define a new pace of product release, where there would be dates and recurring prints and seasons of Magic the Gathering. Soon after that began the first Pro Tour and the first Grand Prix. The second billion cards printed were sold out, and a new major card frame was used for the first time, so redesigns. Then came, I'll talk about Meta Game, the first what we call winter combo, where it was just a nightmare to play anything else than combo and control. We had a very large rules update in 1999. Same year, Hasbro.inc. acquired Wizards of the Coast for $325 million United States dollars. Then Magic Online was released in 2002, 2003. New frame again, the one you call the modern frame for most of us. And then for the first time, a 7-day banned and restricted update was used for the first time. Moving on, we had the second combo winter, pretty much same thing. We had the Feudicide frame attempt and creativity attempt. Lorwyn was definitely a breaking set in the history of Magic. It was heavily creator-centered after this winter combo. It was lore-centered. It brought the creation of planeswalkers, and there was the grand creator type mass update, mostly for rules reason with shapeshifters. Sorry, so the people could just know what kind of creatures there were. So that was I think it was the most important rewarding of all cards ever. The Mythic rarity was introduced, Mythic Rare. WPN was created at that moment for Stalls and Fidelity programs. There was a new major rules update in 2009, mostly damage removed from the stack, I think. Not sure, I think it's one. Commander was born out of EDH in 2011. That's something we saw last year, not coming back on this one. The first paper products came after MTG products. The modern format was born, and there was again a new major rules update in 2014. The new card frame from 2015 with holofoils, and very soon the legendary frame rewards a few years later. Magic the Gathering Arena was announced in 2017. Wizards of the Coast announced for the first time 10 million yearly prize pool. The esports attempt launch was just shut down a couple of years later, also because of COVID, But not only, Magic the Gathering Arena was first published as a release candidate in late 2019. The Judge Academy private separate initiative was launched. Then the COVID-19 situation just blew everything down. The stock plunges down to two-fifths of the value. There was the last GP. There was a very dark era. The first 0-day BNR update was done for the first time. I think it was for Lutri the Spellchaser. The retroactive ethical BNR update was done too, following the events mostly in Florida with the assassination of George Floyd. Wizards of the Coast stopped scheduling BNR updates. Planeswalker decks just got out of question, and they were replaced with Commander decks at that time in 2021. And then last year, at the filming of this video, Dominaria United added the Lost Legends. That was a huge success. For the first time, we had fun-oriented sets, the UN sets, famous unsomething sets, mixed with legal cards, not only being illegal due to the silver border for the first time. We have the Absolute Disaster for Magic 30th edition, we're going to come back to that. And Bank of America warned Hasbro for destroying the long-term value of Magic the Gathering. And here we are, 2023. This is the 30th anniversary of Magic, 30 years of Magic, 30th anniversary. As the filming of this video, this is going to be in 7 weeks. So, as I was saying, trajectories, right? As you know, we live in a capitalist economy. That's something that you might not approve, but it's, whether you like it or not, at least what you are living in and what Wizards of the Coast is living in. This brings automatically a need for growth. You cannot survive in this economy if you don't have plans, perpetual plans of growth. So at some point, you will reach what you call a market saturation, which means you have done everything you could do and the rest of the earth and people and population either does not exist or exists and is not interested in your products. So the first thing you could do is you could just increase the number of stock knowledge units, like product variants and printing increase, which is what we saw, like LS Norn, the last one to this date, has like something like 14 or 17 different variants in the edition it was printed. Or you can expand the universe, which is what we'd see with Lord of the Rings, the extended universe of Magic. My Little Pony, The Walking Dead, Warhammer, Stranger Things, etc. And you can also increase the prices without threatening the sales up to a certain point. And the thing is, at the same time, the global GDP worldwide is just going down. It's never stopped going down since the 1960s, as you see on this graph. And if you compare the Nasdaq, which is the most valuable index of United States economy, and the Hasbro stock, you will see a strong difference here. And this concluded 2022 with the happening of the Fireside Chat, which is a screenshot of this chat, which is a chat that was given by Wizards of the Coast following some very complex and intricate situations and economic situations, mostly with Hasbro. So it was a reference to, I think it was Nixon or Reagan, I don't remember which one it was the president of the United States who did the Fireside Chat for the first time, like inviting journalists to make some public announcements in front of his chimney, sitting on a chair and stuff. So that's what was done basically with Wizards of the Coast, in the presence of, if I remember well, Cynthia Williams, who was responsible for Magic the Gathering at that time, Wizards of the Coast maybe, and Chris Cox, who was now responsible Hasbro, I think. Things have moved a little since then, but the people are pretty much the same. And we learned at least a couple of things that were said through this, like there are 60 million players worldwide. It's the first time Wizards of the Coast has been communicating on this for a very long time. The last thing I could find was about 25 million people, like almost 9 years ago. So they said, they claimed the amount which 50 million players are estimated to be currently playing, which means people, there's a difference between people having cards and people who are actually playing Magics from time to time. This is the result of surveys. We have to dig deeper than this, of course. The average Magic player has moved from 27-something years old to 30 years old, inducing it's slightly older. The casual player base makes up about 80% of the total, but this is just true for every game on the planet. Actually, there's the casual, everything that has, any game that has a competitive scene has about this 80% to 20% ratio. That's what you find usually. Half of the people identified as social players, and half of them identified also as collectors. We also learned that Magic was, at that time, supposed to be the first brand from Hasbro to beat the $1 billion estimated value from inside and outside expertise. We know now that it's been done. They stated, they published that it just passed the $1 billion United States dollars estimation. And then we have two statistics that I invite you to be very careful with, because this is a strong survivor bias metric. They claim that install play is trending upwards back again to something like 75% of pre-pandemic numbers, and they claim that more than 80% of stores were growing or equal to last year's activity. But of course, this is only for the people who survived the tragic pandemic economic plunge. They also stated there were something like 10 million registered players on Magic Arena, and they also added that people who play digital and tabletop spend about something in the average 40% more money than other players on Magic the Gathering. And then remembering the experience of players is pretty easy to remember. A third of them has less than 3 years experience, a third has 10 or more, and the last third is in between. So I did some statistics for you guys. I went to do some statistics with the complete Magic the Gathering sets that were out. The statistics were extracted between February to April 2023. So some of these might like the very last things from last month, doesn't really matter. So on this graph here, you see that year after year, you got the number of printed creatures in the back with the bars diagram. All right. What is interesting is that if you put the power to mana value ratio of each creature from year to year, and you do the same thing with toughness and the addition of both, you get this graph. This very interesting graph shows that everything here has been growing about the same all the time. And apart from what we see, the combo winters here and some stack in 2022, you see that globally the number of creatures is increasing, and the ratio of power, toughness, or both summed is really going up. Like really. This is starting from 0.5 to 0.7 something, if I remember well, and this is kind of stagnating, but the sum is going up, as you can see. So yeah, if you just use this on the scatter plot graph and you put all the extension on the chart, you see that clearly things were really more densified here, and slowly it goes up, and it kind of spreads with a line going up. Don't worry about the points here, the ones that are very high in the sky. These points do not represent like an addition of magic, an extension with huge extensive dinosaurs or something. No, it's just because of like the list, for instance. This is the list. The list has a number of 1,700 cards. It's a huge extension, so you got a lot of creatures, so that just explains why you find some reprint sets very high in the sky, like commander decks and stuff like that. If you now count the creature ability, the density of ability by creature, and as a reminder, I put this white line, which is the same as last graph, which is the total number of creatures printed. If you get the number of abilities, not keywords, all abilities by creature, you can see that really you got something going up. You got something going like from 1.5 to 2 on the average. All right. If you now look at some specific keywords, notably the keywords that go against any form of interactivity, like indestructible, that prevents your permanence from being destroyed. It didn't really exist until a couple cards from the beginning of Alpha, and then it just boomed in 2004, and until then it never ever stopped growing. Not only did the number of prints grow, but also the ratio did strongly increase out of the total of creatures. Now, for the next graph and this graph that I'm going to mention, remember, if you play Duel Commander, you don't need to know that 10,000s of creatures or copies of something you're searching for were printed, because just one is enough to overcome the rest. If you had like a very non-interactive ability, for example, with indestructible here, if this indestructible ability is printed once on a card, it's legal. We have no rotation, we have no permanent banning of all the cards in Duel Commander. So anything that gets printed is legal until the end. So either it's removed by making things illegal, or it's just played and it erases instantly from the charts most of the cards that are less interesting than this one. So any print is a hiding factor of a lot. Okay, so this is very, very important to note for holographs. So now, moving on to some less interactive keywords like Shroud, Hexproof, and Vortex, what you see is that Shroud, which is actually counterintuitive for beginners, doesn't really get an update. It's just more or less the same number of cards over time every year. But what you see is that Hexproof and Shroud go up in value, and the number of cards is really, really substantially higher than it used to be, and it's growing fast. Actually, it's growing exponentially. Same thing, you got the ratio here out of the total numbers of prints, and you've got the trend line for the ratio. So clearly, you know there's going to be more and more Shroud, Hexproof, and Ward creatures, artifacts, enchantments, lands, whatever you want it to be. Another thing that is really against interactivity is that spells, cards, could not be countered. So I filtered out everything that couldn't be countered for your information. This is done with the use of regular expressions for the people who are interested that you can do in database. So if you extract all the cards that cannot be countered over the years and you just get an exponential regression line here, you can see pretty well that it's not going down. It's actually really going up. The numbers on the left, I know, are not high on this one. It's 10, 20, 30, but really that's a lot. Like, there was a moment in time if you wanted to have a full DC deck of non-counterable things, you couldn't even find 100% cards. Not counting the lands, let's just say 60 to round things up. Now you can easily find 60 things that cannot be countered. That's a huge difference. Same again, countering the summoning sickness is the legendary haste ability. Same here, you got the number of prints on the bottom, you got the train line, and you've got the ratio out of the total and the train line for the ratio. I think it's pretty obvious that you're getting more and more haste, but also more and more hasty things among the total. Something different now. Since 2007, we had the planeswalkers entering the field. So it all started with Lorwyn with 5 planeswalker prints, and it never really stopped since then. So you were wondering how many planeswalkers were printed since then. Well, as you see on this graph, it's completely going top. It's skyrocketing. Like, the number of planeswalkers it's not doubling every year, but it's going really, really high in number. And again, if you have a ratio out of the total number of prints for every year, it's going up, like exponentially up. So now, as you know, the creatures are stronger and stronger. They have more power, they have more toughness, but also more power especially. They have more abilities, so they will attack and destroy the planeswalkers faster and faster. As a response to that, creatures have been slowly creeping down to being better and better for the same rarity, or having rarity downgraded for the same efficiency. So you will see the same thing with planeswalkers, and it has started. Planeswalkers are now available as rares and uncommons, and for the third time in history, because this was just the 5 initial planeswalkers before the invention of mythic rarity, we can now see that we're going to have, again, planeswalker prints and reprints with the rarity rare, uncommon, maybe common at some point, and it's not going down, as you see. So now I did this graph. If you think of planeswalkers, you think of mana value, and you think of loyalty counters when they enter the battlefield. So I made a graph with a reference 1-to-1 value in dashed here. If you just want to know, this is to mean that if you have a planeswalker that costs 4 mana and has 4 starting loyalty, it's a 1-on-1 ratio, okay? So this is the 1-on-1. 5 mana for 5 loyalty counters, etc. So what you can see here is that it is also going up. The number of planeswalkers might change, but the average loyalty you find, as you see on this line, is going up. And also, because planeswalkers now are too slow, because you only use them during your turn and once, there used to be the planeswalker pass test, like can it defend itself, can it has an impact when it hits the board. It's not enough anymore now, and if you promote stuff like Rod, Shroud, etc., then you're probably fucked up with your planeswalkers. So they need to have something new, which is why now we have planeswalkers with non-loyalty abilities. And as you can see, it is a slightly going up trend. If you accept the War of the Spark event in 2019, it's completely going up. All right. So something now that is on the other side, it's promoting interactivity. So what happens if you want to find everything that can counter a spell or ability or all the spells and abilities or whatever, right? You do it with regular expression again. And you get the average mana value of all the cards that have this text. What you see is for the years, over 30 years, it has gone up, but clearly up. So not all the things do follow the creature creeping up. Clearly, the what you call counterspell-like cards do not follow the same trend. They go the exact other way. Same thing if you just were to destroy or exile something specific with a target, as you know from the rules, or all the things. Again, you got more and more prints in the total. They do not represent a very higher trend as time goes by, but what you see is the mana value is slightly going up, but not that much, okay? But if you just find what you would call board sweepers, I did not include the ones that bounce everything, but just damaging everything, exiling everything, destroy everything, which means with Magic, each something or all something. What you see here is that the number of prints is also going up. The average mana value is completely skyrocketing. We've gone from something like 3 here to something like 5. That's going exactly the opposite of what creators are. So it's actually not a problem you have. It's normal. It's true. You having less and less opportunities with the same mana to destroy and wipe out the board. So now, if you wanted to target the spot boosts or something, or the spot removal or something, but not removal because we just extract the get. Okay, so the problem is you still get the -X, -Y or something, but it still more or less represents what you see as a creature boost, as an artifact boost, like target artifacts until end of turn becomes 4/4 or something. Mostly creatures, but not only creatures. So if you do that, what you see again is that number of prints is also going up. The proportions are slightly going up. A little more, not that much. But if you look at something that says you don't control, you can do the same thing with you control. You get pretty much the same graph. Which means, of course, preventing some combos, but mostly preventing positive effects on adversary content and preventing negative effects on your own content, on your own permanence, basically. But could be also on the stack. If you do that, what you see is that was retroactively worded for most things, but it was calm, and then came 2012, and it just exploded and went to the top. So this is typically something you only create for beginners so they don't do mistakes. So they are not forced, for example, to destroy their own creatures or stuff like that. Now what I call strategic hand disruption, which means a card that says someone or everyone, whatever, reveal hands, you find cards, and then you discard or exile the cards that were found. Okay, so you just basically choose something out of someone's hands. The average mana value was going up, and it's slightly going down now, but also the tool ratio. The tool ratio, as you see here, was going up, but now goes down again, which indicates less and less strategic hand disruption for pretty much the same amount of mana. Now something different, leaving the world of interaction, when it comes to stabilizing mana bases. Something that I found funny is to count the number of non-basic lands with basic land subtype. If you look at what's happening, you can see clearly that more and more of these were printed, and not just one or two. You know, if you look on the left side of the graph, this is 30, this is 50. None of these lands are crazy, but most of them are quite useful. I think notably the Triumphs and the New Capenna Trail lands that are the first of a kind. Very, very helpful. The Ravnica dual lands and stuff like that. All right. So that is very interesting. That just shows that Wizards of the Coast has been printing factually better ways for each set and for each reprint set to fix mana bases, because fixing mana bases is something either people have to learn to do by themselves, or you will find better ways to play more decks. So either it's a constraint because whatever format you're playing does not allow you to fix correctly your mana bases, so you have to reduce your colors, or the game prints more mana fixers from lands and it becomes easier to play pretty much anything you want, which is more creative but also more dangerous. So it is notable that it's quite hard to fix and play more diversified and more extensive mana bases. So clearly here you see the editor chose a path to make things easier for people to play Magic. But if you just want to go deeper on that, you just have to select lands that produce more than one color, including any color, all right? So if you do that and you search multiple terms that reflect that what your print does, you see once again, the number of cards here is crazy. Look at the numbers on the left. This is less than 100 and this is close to 400 per year. As you can see, exponential trend line for the average here. What I did here was, over the last 7 years, making a small series of the top 20 most played lands on Duel Commander top decks from MTG Top 8. So what you see, I just chose some color to put up the fetch lands here, some unclassifiable lands here, some ABUR dual lands here, etc., etc. So what you get is you see that the fetch lands, what you call the fetch lands from Onslaught and Zendikar, are still the most played lands ever and will probably remain the same for a lot of time now. The Wizards gross fixing that was Command Tower is still the most played land. Could be accompanied with Arcane Signet, but Arcane Signet is mostly designed for multiplayer. It's too slow for duels, so it's played. It's a pretty good card, but not that good. So those are the two main fixes made by Wizards of the Coast to make things playable, in addition to allowing planeswalkers in Brawl. Of course, Wasteland was banned this year, so now we have pretty much something with, as you see, some bouncing in and on, forth and back with all the fetch lands. So it still remains pretty much the same, with a good entrance for Urza's Saga and Otawara Soaring City, for example. Pretty nice. So now, what I was interested in is to find whatever is what I call a memory effect that is tied to a player. So for example, the latest at this time, the Ring Tensu does not count as this because it uses an emblem, right? It's not memorized on the player, it's memorized on a creature and an emblem. But poison counters, battle protector, the initiative, the monarch, city's blessing, experience counter, and energy counters do account for this tool. What you see here, this is a cumulative graph, all right? This is not each graph being put in front of the others. It's a cumulative graph. Like this is the accumulation of this plus the rest, all right? What you see is that the last 3 years have been booming up. For the third time you had a spike, and this indicates it's probably not going to stop. Some facts about Magic Arena now. Magic Arena uses dynamic pairing when you're playing Commander, which means mostly due to the Commander you chose, and probably to some cards you put in your deck. The game will pair you against someone who plays a Commander or a similar deck, or a deck that has similar performance. And as long as you have this performance and you're going pretty much regular on this, you will have most of the time an opponent that is always the same. For example, if you play Kinnan, Bond of Prodigy on Historic Brawl right now, your opponent matches will be Kinnan, Sithis, and Golos at this time. You could play different things, but you will see more or less 3 or 4 similar performing commanders that will be 80-85% of your matchups. All right, so this means the metagame is told to you. It's not generated by the players. There's no metagame rotation or adaptation. The game tells you what you're going to play against. There is a permanent playing instance in Magic Arena, which is the latest product. It's not like Magic Online, for example, that just plays the rules for you and acts as a judge for you and asks you the mandatory things you have to answer, even though you would forget them on paper. The game cannot pursue if it doesn't ask you to complete resolving effects, so you have to do things. But Magic Arena has auto-highlighting for everything you can play at the moment, which is a hint to tell you what you can play. Magic Arena gives you whatever is not in your hand but playable as it was in your hand. It's also removing it from the graveyard and exile, which is very bad for people, to learn to play Magic. It has a misclick prevention, no worries about that. It's just a video game, so it's pretty nice to have that. A mistake prevention too, which says, are you really sure you want to target this creature with that effect? This is going with, the stats we saw with you control or you don't control. It has less worse and less worse automata tapping. I was not going to say better and better, but it's also better and better. It uses a target suggestion too, and when it has a problem with a format, a game, or anything, the game uses dynamic software-specific rewarding. Most of these were Alchemy and Baldur's Gate rewarding, etc. Then it has a specific ban and restricted for the formats that are specific to Magic Arena. It uses now online-only mechanics. This is Alchemy stuff like you would find on Hearthstone, for instance. And all the reprints are completely selected one by one and picked by the team as being the things that have the most emblem, nostalgic play, and affinity from players, and also making sure you cannot go crazy with some specific famous combos and stuff. And when it comes to specific content, Magic Arena offers mostly fun-oriented ephemeral game types, the weekly artisan and stuff like that, where you just usually get to play like more basic games where you don't have resources, so you can cast anything you want, even if it costs 1,000 mana for free, or something that gives you extra mana on every turn, etc., etc. So it's just basically done to make you sure you have no constraints on playing. So what are the conclusions for that? I just included 2 quotes from Mark Rosewater here. There's going to be more and more cards, more and more creatures. We're going to have more and more planeswalkers. The stats on everything are going to be higher. Damage, creatures, power, toughness, planeswalker loyalties, counters, whatever. We're going to have more abilities on each and every card. We're going to have less interaction, less disruption, more battlefield presence, more battlefield resistance, which means something doesn't die, and resilience, which means something has died, but it's not a problem, you'll still use it. We're going to have better mana bases and more, I would say, we have a clearer path to less complexity in the game, clearly. About game power, I've been mentioning this a lot of time. When you design a game, you have what you call a game domain, which is whatever you created. So you set up boundaries and you say, I created a game, but it doesn't go anywhere in the sky. There are some limitations and some boundaries that you set so that it remains quite balanced. So when you have switching and rotating formats, games and stuff, you have an old thing that goes and switches to a new thing. Like for instance, you have the old creatures from the sets that are now not legal anymore, but the new ones replace the old ones and they look the same. You don't recreate a whole game domain every time. You can expand the domain, but you don't recreate it. Like you had a 3/3 creature that's green and trample, and you get a 3/3 creature that's green and trample, right? It just changes the name, for instance. It's not a whatever Tusk Charger thing, it becomes a new creature type with a new lore and stuff like that. This is called power shuffling. You just take what you have, you shuffle everything, and it becomes a new state. So you can just remove some effects and add some older effects, and then you can remove the older effects and push back the new. So you basically have rotation. Then you have what you call power scaling. Power scaling is very used when it comes to adding new things into an existing universe. For example, you find that often in the comics world, where people are creating new heroes, and they are wondering why those heroes could be in, how they could be interesting. So they have to be really powerful heroes, but they have to fit into a scale from the less powerful superheroes to the most powerful superheroes, see, and enemies and stuff. So it has to be something you could believe in, right? This is, for example, the inserted sets like Conspiracy, like Modern Horizons and stuff like that. So these sets are inserted into a game domain. And then you have what you call the power creeping and seeping, which is you extend or you contract the game domain for some things. That means, for instance, you had 3 abilities on a creature for 4 mana as a rare, and all of a sudden you push a 5th one. You add strictly a 5th one. That is extending the game domain. You stop telling people we're just going to shuffle the 4 abilities or what this thing does and keep it the same level. We're just going to expand the level. So everything that was printed before, whether abilities were A, B, C, and D, or E, F, J, and H, whatever, if the new one is A, B, C, D, and E, it's strictly better than any other older creatures, for example, or cards, whatever you want it to be. So I just took a few cards to illustrate that. I think the most emblematic one is the 7 Lions from limited edition Alpha that was a rare. Soldier of the Pantheon is not the most crazy thing you can find for one. The argument was just to find something that was a creature, only a creature, a rare creature for 1 white mana. There are many other possibilities that you can find. Other than Soldiers of the Pantheon, like Izamaru, Hand of Condor, you got tons of these. Okay, but not Kithian, for example, which is a mythic creature and flipped as a planeswalkers. All right. So what you get is that this is not a rare anymore, and this became a rare, and there's something that's going to be better. So that's power creeping. Okay. The power seeping. If you take the most printed and sold card that said counter target spell word, it really reads counter spell, and this was the most sold cards from limited edition alpha to 7th edition as a common in the main line of Magic products, right? And then it stopped being printed into those editions. But the replacement that says exactly the same and that's been the most printed card ever since, with less prints but a number of cards sold way higher than counter spells, is Cancel. But Cancel is not W, it's 1 generic mana and W. So that's a power sipping, alright? Like I say, power shuffling is just from any older set. You got 2G, 2 generic mana and a green mana, a trample 3/3 as a common, and now it becomes a 3/3 vigilance. Doesn't really change anything, but it's not the same ability, it's fine. You also have the 3/3, but on the next set there's no 3/3 for 3, but you got a 4/4 for 4, for 3 generic mana and 1 green. So it's pretty much going into the curve. The power scaling, you've had previously Shivan Fire that says for 1 red as an instant you deal 2 damage to target creature, and if you pay 4 additional kicker mana you can deal 4 damage instead. If you go to Modern Horizons 2, they added Unholy Hit, and if you added Unholy Hit, I was closing the window, lots of noise outside. If you add Unholy Hit says deals 2 damage, 1 red instant, to target creature or planeswalker, alright, so adapting to the new world, and it says if you got Delirium, you can do 6 damage instead. So that's something that sits next to Shivan Fire. Is it harder to activate Delirium on Shivan Fire or Kicker? Well, this one is really more regular and foreseeable. This one needs a specific setup. Then you can just have a change in game orientation. As we said, we can have more creature power and more or less non-permanent power. That works. So if you also want to repower things on the run, that is a possibility you have. Like, for example, when they introduced Alchemy 145 and Holy Hit on Magic Arena, this is the same card as this one, except when you have Delirium, it doesn't deal 6, it deals 4 damage instead. You see? So that's something you repower on the fly while the game is running, while the course of time is running. And finally, you can fix the game flow as you print things. You can change the rules. You can use the banned and restricted list, which is just changing the rules. You can reward previous rules. If you remember the companion keyword update, that's a great example of what it was. You can also separate gaming context by creating sub-game types, sub-formats that you can do with, for example, vintage, legacy, pauper, peasant formats, and stuff like that. Or you can also just simply be very careful and add extra care by principle, by design, and have everything expire through temporal legality, which is something you do with rotations in Pioneer and Zenith, for example. And automatically, of course, for playing the last limited set. All right. This leads to speaking about the core, what Hasbro has been doing since then. I put on this line because we're going to talk about economy for some slide here. A couple of information. So 1993, when the first boosters were available for sale, this is not brought back to inflation, by the way. This is straight historical pricing. The boosters were starting at $245 US with something that was called back then truly a manufacturer seller recommended price. The starter packs, for people who knew that, sold at something like $785, and the extension set boosters were set up to $145. Then there was a global price increase in 1995, revised and later boosters prices were raised to $2.95. The starter packs were sold now at $8.95. And in 1996, because of the 4th edition and Chronicles being consecutive, the massive number of reprints lead to some investment bubble investors being very angry and renting back at Wizards of the Coast, which led to what they call the reprint policy statement, inducing a list of cards that would never be reprinted as fulfillment of Wizards of the Coast, that they just truly invested some energy into saying they would never do that. They swore they would never do that publicly. And those cards are also known as a list that is called the reserve list. From 1998 to 2006, the theme decks were now sold at something like $10. With Mercudia, the stat packs, now the bundles, were launched at $24.85. The booster packs raised to $3.29. You see, within less than 10 years, it already was at $3.29. $3.69, $3.99. Then you started having From the Vault boxes sold at $40, which was the first promotional only pack with only promotional cards out of any sets or anything. Then you have the Premium Deck series. Then you have the Commander theme decks, the first product to be enabled, Commander on Magic Online in 2009. In 2010, you had Shards of Alara Premium Boosters, which contain only foils. That was emblematic too. 2011, you had the first Commander series, the Commander decks, which started at $29.95. The Arsenal Commander was sold at $74.99 in 2012, followed by the first paper master sets, which is a set dedicated to mostly reprints from selected things. That was the Modern Masters and started at $6.99 per booster. Then we have, in 2018, the Eternal Masters boosters at $30.99. The Mythic Edition, for the first time, hit an all-time record MSRP at $249.99. 2019 saw the first Ravnica Legends Connector boosters. It was a nudge test. That's what Wizards of the Coast does all the time. They sell a quite meaningful product, but not that much, and they try something new, so the people rant at this product, arguing that, all right, it's not that much, it's not really going to affect the economy or the gameplay, and then several months or years later, you get a ton of these invading the market with new products at the same time. That's how you want to pass new laws against an audience and a population that doesn't want them. It's a very non-psychological effect that you can apply to anything. So the first test of collector boosters was set at $20.99. As you can know, it's not the price we pay anymore. And from the Eldraine rolls out the first definitive collector boosters that were started the era we now live in. Something between 20-25 USD. The deluxe collection was sold at $449.99 USD for the first time ever. And after this time, Wizards of the Coast stops sharing recommended price for all products. So now we don't have this anymore. In 2020, the Double Masters VIP edition was, for the first time, a booster with random cards sold at $75 at distributor level, and on the average it was sold as something closer to $100. In 2020, set boosters were included at just, on the average, $1 more price from regular boosters, and these are now called the draft boosters. In 2022, the Secret Lair bundle price was sold for $549.99 on the website. And for the first time, we had the 30th edition anniversary thing that tried to sell boosters containing random cards at $999, which is something like a quarter of a grand, like $249.99 per booster, which was an all-time breaking record. And at the end of the day, at the end of the year, as inflation started to be really hitting the market, Wizards of the Coast announced 11 price increase on all mainline products due to inflation. And 2023 is not over now, but at the time of this filming, we have the Commander Master set box is announced to be something around $500, and Lord of the Ring is selling the collector boosters over $500 United States dollars at this time. So yeah, we still haven't celebrated the 30th anniversary of Wizards of the Coast of Magic the Gathering, but we don't know what's gonna happen, right? So I took the liberty of showing you over the last 10, 11, 15 years, depending on sites, some emblematic cards. All of these are reserve list cards, and what you see is probably some kind of a pattern. The alpha cards share some museum quality emblem that says they will never really go down in price. But when everything has an economic growth, and investors start to downgrade the most risky investments like cryptocurrency to less risky investment like paper, and even less risky investment like gold or buildings and stuff, part of the economy suddenly goes and booms out to Magic and echoes. This has a ripple that hits Magic the Gathering. So at the end of 2017, 2018, and then at the end of 2020, there was a huge price increase, not necessarily a buyout, just price increases because there was more activity. There was more activity on some specific card, as you can see here. It went to the top. It skyrocketed to something like 3 times, 4 times, sometimes 10 times the price cards used to be before that. And ever since then, as you can see, it's going down again because, as we saw globally, the economy and the world of Magic following the economy are going down. This is mostly due to physics constraints, but doing whole conferences on that, and it's not the topic we're gonna work on today. But just remember, it's just limited to what humanity does with energy and matter on the planet. This creates the illusion of economy that creates whatever you want it to be, including Magic the Gathering products. So if you look at all the cards, some are very specific and have a specific bubble. There are, of course, the all-time reserve list products like the Tundra here that never really went down. It keeps going up, barely going down. You have one-shot cards like Moat. Moat only had one print and one legal print, and Moat went to the skyrocket stuff and then crashed down in value. So this is because Moat has less play than Tundra, for example. If you look at this Tainted Pack, for example, Tainted Pack was never reprinted starting from Odyssey until 2021 after. So the card was getting more and more expensive, and more people play Tainted Pack. Especially if you wanted a foil version, it was going nuts. This is a pseudo reserve list, as it's a list of the cards that haven't been reprinted yet. But Wizards of the Coast is constant at spotting these ones for the market and reprinting them and inserting a certain amount of these cards into the new packs, Commander packs, reprints, master sets, whatever you want it to be. Then you have all-time stars like Sylvan Library here. Sylvan Library is getting more and more played, but more and more printed. So it's stabilizing somewhere pretty high, and there's been a constant fight between Wizards of the Coast and the people playing the card. Like, is it reprinted enough, or is it reprinted too scarcely, you know? And one interesting thing is there are many reserve lists, like the Illustrator that were banned, like Therese Nielsen, for example, are somehow a reprinted list. You have the reserve list of cards that have been marked as inappropriate, that are not considered magic cards anymore. And also you have the commander cards. The commander specific cards like Retrofit Foundry. These cards have the lowest reprint ratio of all Magic the Gathering cards ever. So if these cards found out to be used in some other formats of games, like Retrofit Foundry was used in different decks, then you can see on this graph that the price will suddenly go up. And then you get 1 or 2 reprints and it can go down again. So what I did is compare whatever was before the explosion of most of these bubbles, especially the 2020 bubble, from 2019 to 2023, among the top 100 most played cards in Magic the Gathering, which gives actually plus 60% price increase on these top 100 cards. If you speak of Duel Commander, it follows more or less the same trend. Alright, so it's just going up. But as you saw, the inflation has been hitting the world constantly. This is the price differential from year to year, from period to period, and over the last years, inflation went really high. So if you flatten the value of these brought back to inflation, actually playing Duel Commander has only, quotes, only raised 33% for the top 100 cards over the last 4 years. It hasn't doubled, tripled, or multiplied by 10. It's just pretty much the same price, which is kind of good. And of course, when it comes to something we saw at the beginning, after talking about the prices, we saw that we can print more variants. We didn't really talk about that, but we can print more products. This is a product timeline from Wizards of the Coast. I think this is pretty self-explanatory, right? This tells you that there's been a lot more products recently than it used to be. Like 2022 had more products than 2009, 2008, and 2007 united. You see what I mean? This is crazy. And as you saw, the consequences of that were that when chasing growth, you could actually be getting recession. And if you compare the average Nasdaq index on the top here and the Hasbro index on the back, they follow the same trend globally. They are linked one to another. They go up and down pretty much at the same time, but the general trend and the variance on this is not the same. There's been a recovery from the COVID-19 situation, but then it started going down, as expected. It's not really the fault of Hasbro, you see. This is what's happening in the world right now. So the question is, if you look at the income of Hasbro and what they're doing, are they going to hold on? Because if they don't hold on, there will be nothing to talk anymore. No new Magic cards. If they just crash, there's no Duel Commander improvement until the end of time. And this is not a view of my own mind of anything, you know. The people ranting about the Fireside Chat have been crazy. All the specialized websites have been completely crazy sad, you know, extremely sad to discover the disconnection from the top C-levels from Wizards of the Coast and Hasbro and the player base, you know. So that was what most of the sites says. But also, as this is a billion-dollar brand, you have third-party specific private analysts that wrote many articles and conclusions saying that it was not going the good direction. Magic the Gathering was not going the good direction, mostly by printing too many things, too different cards, too many times, and too often. But also, the Bank of America, which is surveying and keeping an eye on the major brands and major companies, and also the smallest ones into United States, wrote a report, and the report was completely slamming down Hasbro for the monetization of Magic the Gathering, saying that would just go into the wall, that would crash at some point if they kept going this way. Is it a view of the mind? Is it a dream? Is it a hallucination? Absolutely not. It's a nightmare. And as you see, Hasbro has to cut down 50% of its workforce, which is 1,000 people who were thrown out of the company due to poor results. And I'm not even going to talk about the rents and the affairs on Dungeons and Dragons, which is something different. But also, Dungeons and Dragons was something really interesting to look this year. And the thing is, Wizards of the Coast is not the top-selling cardboard game anymore. Like Pokemon was selling more, just sold more, I think, more than Yu-Gi-Oh! And Magic the Gathering United last year. It's just crazy. Pokemon is really attractive to people who are playing right now. And you got new contestants like the Vice Farts, Mituzu, and Flesh and Blood. Flesh and Blood has a lot of attractivity, and it's a breath of fresh air too. It's not a bubble, it's really working right now. So lots of people are attracted to Flesh and Blood. So if we keep having diversity in card games, that would mean prices would go down, but that would also mean we would have less people playing the game, because the global TCG audience and market share is not infinite. All right? So it's not about ranting, it's not about condemning or pointing with fingers like, yeah, you're doing bad. It's just about being worried, genuinely being worried about what's going to happen now. But also, if you look now in terms of technicity at what Magic the Gathering is, the question is, did we reach an end in creativity? I mean, how many times do you think we can renew Magic content? It's been crazy what the R&D at Wizards of the Coast has been doing over 30 years, but it's just absolutely amazing. So many different things to play. That was really... Every time there's a new set, we're just like, whoo! Alright, new mechanics. But the question is, how long? For example, you can take a look at what we call deciduous and evergreen keywords. The keywords that remained after the set they were introduced to goes up. For example here, if you look at this very shiny Mox Opal in the center, this has Metalcraft, right? Now the question is, why is it not Metalcraft that's written on the Inventor Sphere? Same for Tezzeret. Why isn't there a Metalcraft mentioned here? Because there are in different sets, okay? That's why you see as deciduous and evergreen keywords. But this is, for example, something I cannot say in English, but in French, you have to know that having first strike and taking the initiative is the same word. It's initiative in French. Both of these are initiative. So if you have someone who's a beginner at Magic Gathering, you can explain to someone that if player A has this and player B has this, you can explain that player B has initiative, but not initiative on creatures, while the opponents have initiative. But they lost initiative and they cannot get initiative, but they have initiative. They do. See, that's something that is really specific to French, but I believe you have this in many other editions. And sometimes you have so many different stuff that do the same that it can be misleading. Here, I dare you a little. Do you know, without checking, what partner with keyword rules is? How do you rule partner with? It's written in the rules that partner with is an extension to partner, but it's not. It's a reduction and an extension at the same time. This means you can only partner with another card that is named Rowan Kenrith, so it's less partner than partner. But it's also more, as this means and implies you have an enter the battlefield trigger ability that says when this enters the battlefield you can search for the other card here, Rowan Kenrith, into your library and put it into your hand, then shuffle. But also, if you look at the wording of these cards, something that is going to appeal to you is that for the first time, Wizards of the Coast is not writing the card names completely because the reminder text is too long. So if you have Peer Imaginary Tooth-Thinned, the reminder text will not mention Peer Imaginary Tooth-Thinned. It will just mention Peer. So what happens if any card named Peer is printed one day? It's kind of hard to explain that to a new player. And then you have so many trials to do the same thing because we might be reaching an end. Do you know what those 10 abilities have in common and in difference? I will tell you what they have in common. They work with +1/+1 counters. You can check. But the difference is All these abilities function differently. And some of them, most of them, have a name. Ugh. Some don't have a name, like the two ones here, but Alliance, Outlast, Scavenge, Maynard, Reinforce, Support, Evolve, and Bolster. Really? Do you remember all the difference if I don't show you reminders text? This is going to be a nightmare at some point. Same here for Poison. This is the original Poison. It's not the same wording as being Toxic 1. This one is not Toxic 1. And it's not Poisonous 1 either. These three cards have different wordings, but they do the same thing in the end, not the same way. This one is Thin. Thin is the only card in the set that gets poison counters, so it gets reminder text. This is a wording, in fact, that says you get poison counters when you hit the player, but also -1/-1 counters on creatures that it deals damage to. Thing is, Weaver works the same, but doesn't deal poison to doesn't add poison counter to players, and this means you get poison counters on you upon resolving the spell. And Soulscar Mage is -1/-1 counters, but it's not Weaver. It's a specific kind of Weaver. You see, that's beginning to be slightly misleading anywhere. You know Kicker. Great ability. You know multi-kicker, why not? It's a multiple kick. Oh wait, it's fine. But what is Escalate? What is Escalate if not being a multi-kicker, as you choose one or more here? You see the difference that between Escalate and the kicker here? Doesn't really mean anything. And then you got Entwin. And Entwin does the same thing. You kick for 2 and you choose both. Except you don't choose both, because then some spells were printed with more than 2 choices, so Entwine became choose all instead of both. And then you can have keywords that you can see on cards, but they don't exist. This card has affinity for tokens, this one for forests, this one for equipment. You would expect gates to be not really more common, enchantments or creatures, the most printed magic type ever, to exist, but it does not. This does not have affinity for creatures. What? This does not have affinity for enchantments. And what is domain if it is not affinity for basic land types? What is this cauldron if it doesn't have affinity for creatures in your graveyard? And when Code of Calling was printed, Word of Invention was added years later, and these look like the same, but they don't. This reduces colored mana, but this does not, for some abusive prevention purposes, we suppose. Because this is strategic. This means you have to think before you play it. You don't have anything that you want to do with these cards under your eyes. You have to know your deck. But also, 2 more things. When they did this one, they updated the reminder text. Your artifacts can help cut the spell. This is 100% lore. You do not need that sentence. Read this reminders text again without this line. You get the same thing. But they added it also to convoke. Your creatures can help cut the spell. Like the small things look at you with a small eyes like, I want to help you. So you have this need to nerf complex things, but add lore and things to appeal to new players. And also, we're just playing with cards. I know, online it's different, but with physical cards, they have to remain the same form factor and the same use that the first printed alpha cards we had a long time ago. And the physical limits are more or less reached. If you look at the double cards here, the double spell cards, this is a split card, this is a fuse card, this is an aftermath card. They don't really work the same way, but they have the same effect, splitting a card in 2 in the surface, from top to bottom. You have modal double-faced cards, you have cards split and fused together from left to right, from top to bottom. You have cards that flip up and down, cards that remain in place and get transformed. You can transform from the graveyard, you can exile and transform back again, you can have face down cards, you can have morphs, you can then manifest, which is putting anything down, face down. we pretty much reached everything. We have stickers on the cards. And we can mix all those limits and do even crazier things. Like we can have something I've been expecting for years. We can have land tokens, forest tokens, enchantment tokens. We can have aura tokens. We have cards that have every creature type that are not creatures, but also they have a creature type. So these things are contradictory. You can use opponent's lands to cast your spells. If you know what Raging River does, you need to really see a psychiatrist of some kind, because it's really, really insane. Serum Powder changes the way you mulligans. You can have minus something, negative statistics. You can change the behavior of mana. You can exile cards, and you can change twice the zone they go to during resolving an ability. You can also have the weird Sylvan Library that everyone knows about. You can bring things back from exile to the graveyard. You can enchant instant cards in graveyard. If you know what Baldevian Shaman reads or what Camouflage reads, just go ahead, go to the Gatherer and read the cards. You're going to be amazed. Sorrow's Path is crazy. You have attractions, you have side decks that are not Magic the Gathering decks, but decks of Magic the Gathering products that are not Magic the Gathering cards. You have counters on instants. You have things that change the colors of everything that is not in play on the battlefield or whatever. You have the Kravikan Horror and stuff like that that just takes care of the order of the things in your graveyard. It's crazy what we have. So duration and in creativity, I don't know. But let's just focus on Commander now. So since Commander was invented, we pretty bounced in number of cards. We went from 20,000 cards, something, to 25,000 cards, probably hitting 26 at the end of a year. And I did graphs too here. I looked at the legendary creatures and how the rarity was scattered around the different rarities. So if you look at this, what you see is the number of legendary creatures is booming, is exploding, is skyrocketing, completely skyrocketing. Like look at the number we have in 2022. It's more than close to the 10 first years of Magic the Gathering. And also, as this become a necessity to sell Commander stuff, a necessity to raise the abilities of something that's legendary, that's supposed to be very unique in terms of effects and power, you have to detach and be noticeable from the random other stuff. So we have the same creeping upstairs. So we have more and more legends that are printed to mythic, but also rare and uncommon. Might be coming to common soon, actually. If we look at the number of reported decks on Magic the Gathering Top 8, mtg.com, you get a super high increase over the last years. And thank you everyone around the world for doing so, because this greatly helps other players, this helps us in the community, this helps everyone. So, nice. But if you look at MTG Top 8 results over the last 7 years, this is superposed graph of superposed zone graph of every card type and the trend over the years. So you have the white lines are trend and differences, and you can see that you got slightly less lands, we got way more creatures as expected, you got little less instant, you got a little less sorceries, you got way less artifacts, a little more enchantments, and planeswalkers remain the same. But don't worry, I put this on a stack graph. This is a 100% stack graph, so it goes from 0 to 100%. So what you have is a cumulated total of things. So what you see is just what I told you about last slide. We're losing one land, we're gaining 4 creatures, if not more on the average. We are losing 1 artifact or 2, getting 1 more enchantment, maybe more than 1 enchantment. the same number of planeswalkers, and the rest is just completely going down. Like sorceries and instants are going down. What I did is also break down by color. So this is not 100% stack. This is a 100% stack of the total of each. But remember, a magic card can have more than one color symbol. Okay, this is just based on mana cost. Couldn't go on identities, too complex to do, but this is only based on mana cost and what was played. And the mana cost can have more than one green, but green white, green one blue, etc. So the sum here doesn't sum up to 100, of course. All right. So this is a reminder of what the quantities are, but the 100% stack is correct. So what you see is you have a little more white, you have less blue, considerably less blue, not more black. You have slightly less red, it's almost constant, and slightly the same number of green, and less uncolored cards, all right? So this is the change we have over the years, and it seems like it's more or less stable, and if not, it's stabilizing at the moment. But if you look at the average deck mana value, you get that, which means it's not about resolving a format, it's about resolving the game. It's about resolving Duel Commander as a whole. People put apart the most expensive cards, and as people started winning more and more games by playing impactful cards that cost less or better cards for the same costs, what you expect is, of course, having a huge decrease in the deck average mana value over the last years. This was done on a sample of last slide was 10,000 or 12,000 decks reported on MTG Top 8. And if you look at the commander's mana value, the sum of commander mana value, if you have partners, you have... no, this is the average, sorry. So you have two partners, this is the average of the partners. So the average mana value here is something that went up to 2020, and then it started going down, and it stabilized to something like 350 now. Be careful on the left, the scale doesn't start at 0, this is more for readability concerns, right? So now I want to talk about player experience. So you're gonna say, what, bro? What? Player experience? What is the player experience? Player experience is derived from user experience that mostly designs and calls out to what you experience through a brand, a product, something that is a game. So instead of having a user interface with your product, service, whatever you have a player interface, which is websites, table, Magic Arena, friends. That is your playing interface. That is how you interact with the world, all right? So your experience is what you have. It comes from a man named Don Norman who wrote this principle in 1996. He says, the user experience encompasses all aspects of end user's interaction with the company, its services, and its products. That's basically everything you can think about. So it starts before you hear about something, like before you even heard about Duel Commander, and it goes up to the very last point where you stopped using this product and thinking about it, having any relationship with the product or the game. Here, for example, Duel Commander. So it could be a lot of questioning, how did you hear about the game? How were your first opponents? What emotions did it bring to you? How did you and why did you recommend Duel Commander to new players? Did you train players? Did you make new friends? Could you afford playing your deck? How often do you change your new decks? How often you build a new deck? What is triggering you to build a new deck? You see, millions of questions. And the thing is, everything is user experience, is player experience. Our website is a website to host events, to tell which decks perform the best, the most, having real life tournaments where you buy cards, the communities, the people doing online content, Discord, social networks, people organizing tournaments, adding food and beverage to the locations, to the venues, the judges, the illustrators, the alterators, whoever you want it to be, including a definition getting from ChatGPT of Duel Commander, for example. So everything is PX, player experience. So now, specifically, when you maintain player experience and you care about it through a banned and restricted list, you have a lot of questions. Is it an easy winning sequence? Does it have some special effects regarding to its mana value that are way over the top? Is it too much damaging? Does this win with only 2 cards a combo, and one of them, for example, being a commander? Does it have a really too low mana value? It's not a dangerous card, but it's just a fuel or something of some kind. Does it fit an archetype? Does it win too much? Does it counteract and contradict commander mechanics? Does it compare to any other banned cards? Are people unusually unhappy about it? Like, you have to listen to the people who play, who say this is not really good. Does it removes out the deck without anyone noticing them, just because it power creeps up, etc. So actually, all of this and many, many more, like millions of questions, is what you define as a player experience, is what we try to think about. So when you sum up why something needs, in your opinion, to be banned or legal, whatever, in one sentence or two, you are probably wrong. It goes with bounces. It's just like playing pool, you have to have several bounces, of the ball until you hit something else. And actually, when we do this, we have to fight cognitive biases, the emphasis of your individual thoughts, and then searching for approval within people with what we call community reinforcement. Just Google it on Wikipedia. You get a lot of psychological articles to read about. You get to discuss a lot with people who are very tense, who have a special relationship with the game. You try not to bring everyone down. You try to cheer up. You can get mocked, threatened. This happens sometimes. You can have personal attacks, like I'm trying to find who's agreeing with me among the committee, and I'm going to try to blame the people who just didn't agree with me, as if it was a sum of individuals. It's not. It's a whole thing, So you're fighting frustrations, including for yourselves, because whatever you found out a long time ago was a good deck is going to be banned for you also sometimes. You're trying to understand what the problems are. You have a lot of noise and people having 10,000 discussions to basically have 1 or 2 clever sentences that you can extract, and that really help you take decisions, because people have to talk with each other, and it gets renewed and starts from zero every time someone new joins the discussions, which is pretty normal for a society to going on and moving on, working correctly. So sometimes people try to speak with you personally and with private conversations, trying to get and extract confidential information, private information. You take the risk of unbalancing everything and having people very angry, and most of the time you end up being politics, relationship, and diplomacy, because you have to support your decisions even if you don't agree with them, and has to be taken as a whole. So, to think about that and talk to you about that, I've been trying to introduce this with what we call complex systems thinking in a broad way, and the dynamics of complex systems. This is a field, a research field, a scientific field that was more or less prominent since the 1970s, that sees the complexity of the world as not only simple equations, but only also things moving according to the others, and like like if you turn the buttons and the knobs on the faucet to just balance things, you try to have more or less flow, this changes everything. Like you have something moving to A, B, C, and D. When you move A, B, C, and D go down. When you move A the other way, B, C, and D do not go up. It is not a back and forth equation. This is complex. So if you look at this graph, what you see here within the squares, the rounded squares, is it's a thing. It's a thing happening. It's an event. Okay, it's a trend. If it's an arrow going up, it's a trend up arrow. If it's going down, it's a trend down. And if it's a diamond shape like that, it's an arbitrary choice, which means it doesn't go anywhere. It's just whatever you want it to be. Now there are relationships between this, and when you have a green row here, it means it has a positive impact. Does it mean it makes the right thing go up? It means it boosts the current trend or whatever is within the destination, all right? If the destination is going down, it boosts it going down. Negative means it tempers the trend going down, okay? Or up. It just tempers it. Then you have the positive feedback loop, which means something is self-sustaining, impacting. It's impacting itself. Like, for example, we're going to see that in the end. We're going to see that. And the diminished delay loop, it means something is affecting something else in a weird way, but not instantly. It needs some time to have a feedback or have an impact on whatever is done. All right, so let me illustrate that. So it really is going to be really obvious to you. As you know, Wizards of the Coast is printing all the time cards. So there are always perpetually new cards in the whole Magic the Gathering legal stock. Okay, so the playable legal card pool is always increasing. Right? Green arrow. So the playable deck pool is increasing. Here, playable means you take a randomizer, you put all the legal cards, you ask it to choose at random 100 cards for Duel Commander and to generate any deck, as long as it's legal. It's completely dumb, it just picks anything, but it works, alright? This is a legal deck. Is it good? Certainly not. There's a very low chance that at random it's going to be good, but it's legal, all right? So you got millions and millions and billions of playable legal decks, all right? Out of which you got something which is a competitive list, a competitive deck, all right? So as this increases, the number of competitive decks decreases because whatever beats a lot of the rest beats more and more of the rest. So the number of different competitive things goes down, right? But also, as competitive decks go down, more and more competitive decks would go down, even if the card pool would not increase. Which means after trying and playing, people will automatically, by experience, filter out whatever is less competitive than the rest. This is the perpetual temptation of having what you call tiers. That doesn't work at all, but that means you have some sort of classification in your head, but we say, this is stronger than most of the thing here. Not everything, but most of the thing. And at some point, there has to be something that is the perfect ideal list that just beats everything else. But research and development to find it will take more time that we have at disposal right now. Okay? So, as the competitive lists go down, what we think is Duel Commander gets solved. Not a format, right? Not a game format at a snapshot. I'm talking about the whole principle of Duel Commander. The game, the very game itself. So the solving, regardless of what you do, is going up all the time. Which is also going to temper the raising of the player base activity. Because in the world right now, there are more and more people playing Magic the Gathering. And also playing Duel Commander. I could split that in two. But as more and more people play what do? They speak about that. They make people try. They bring decks. They introduce game like Duel Commander to new people. They go to shops. They ask shopkeepers to create tournaments, inviting other people to just try Duel Commander. Spoiler, that's how I started myself. So the number of players is a self-positive feedback loop. The more people play and speak about Duel Commander, the more there will be, automatically. And then, this means the player-based activity is going to increase because more people will play more. Even if they play less, the number of people will be growing faster than what they do or do not. So the player-based activity means it's going to self-sustain because if people spend more and more time finding better decks, then the others will be left aside or will have to follow the trend and also find more activity. So this means it's going to positively impact solving Duel Commander. You see? So solving Duel Commander will also get everything faster when it comes to filtering out competitive decks in return. You see how things are complex here? But it's not the only thing. Wizards of the Coast can have an orientation. As we saw, they could just, for example, have more creatures printed being stronger and stronger. So they try things. And as we said about the nudging, when they try things and things are successful, long time later, they make it the norm. But also, the orientation of Wizards of the Coast could positively or negatively impact the playable deck pool. They could just change the things. They could just reward how things work. They could just tell you the cards are now being banned from Magic, you see? So this could be positive and negative. But we could also, as a committee, have rules changes, which means we could directly affect which cards could be banned or not, or legal. You can change the word here. Being banned or legal doesn't mean anything. And it would positively or negatively impact the playable card pool, in return changing everything here. But also, we can make rules changes that directly impact the competitive decks. For example, that was the case for the Commander Swap. The Commander Swap or the partner rules that was introduced in February 2022. These are not ban cards. These are rules changes that directly affect the number of competitive decks. You see, the playable deck pool didn't change because of that, but the competitive decks changed. All right. So this is an example of how complex dynamics when it comes to systems work. I'm going to illustrate it with something you're going to see more and more into the discussions as time goes. Wasteland, the card Wasteland, is a land that says you enters the battlefield and tap, you tap it, sacrifice it to destroy target non-basic land. As Wasteland popularity was getting more and more prominent within Commander in a broad sense, the reprints and really helped playing more and more Wastelands, especially since the price went down from, how to remember, from something like 50, 60 foil to $15 foil and even less sometimes. So Wasteland became more and more popular. But this means the color intensity of decks is going down. First, because when you play Wasteland, you cannot create any color with it. If you don't have an Urborg or a Yavimaya next to it, it's not going to generate any colored mana. Okay, so your own color intensity goes down, but also the color intensity of everyone goes down, which means the decks that are being played, the ones that win, are going to have less and less color intensity. And in return, we have more or less deck diversity. I mean, this is the final ending choice. So I'm adding here the fact that the trend could be going up and down, all right? Because I should decompose this into two things, deck diversity going up, deck diversity going up. I just made it into one cell. So, at some point, we decided to ban Wasteland in Duel Commander for several reasons. You have to read the announcement if you want to read everything, and you forgot about that. Whether we do it or not means we could negatively impact the color presence, or we could positively impact the non-basic played land diversity. Because once you ban Wasteland, once it becomes forbidden, people suddenly are less frightened to play some lands that didn't exist before that. They are less afraid to be mana screwed on anything. Like a Triumph, for example, where you fetch with a fetch land, you cannot respond to that. It enters the battlefield tapped. You have 3 colors, and the wasteland would just go, poof, you go to 0. Pretty rough. Same for Ravnica Bounce lands, for example. Lots of lands can be mentioned. Even some simple dual land that makes 2 colors could be completely cutting you down from a color. So, actually, when this was banned, people completely increased the number of non-basic lands. But as we saw, Wizards of the Coast is printing more and more lands with more basic land types and more colors per land. So actually, when they see that it works and they get positive feedbacks and more diversity on plays, they will just go up, and that's what they do. We just saw that a few graphs ago. So the orientation of Wizards says we should just do something up. We should just go in favor of more land diversity, non-basic land stuff, etc. So the non-basic lands played in Duel Commander is going to increase. So the sensitivity that a deck or a game has, not a deck, a game situation mostly has, to non-basic denial for example, Runation, for example, also Armageddon, but it's not really non-basic, but Armageddon for Magus of the Moon and stuff, means also you would just die more often to these types of cards, including Blood Moon, which means now we are having a thing where Blood Moon, that is just a very good card, it always was a very good card, was ignored until then. But then, because all these changes induced slowly creeping from the back this, we have more and more criticity. Because now I could add another variable that says, as we saw, the mana cost is going down. So the first turns are critical when you play Duel Commander. And if you miss your critical turns, you cannot have the time to recover from Blood Moon and getting destroyed by it. You see? That is an example of how you can explain and detail things. So now, let's talk about making cards legal or not. When you have a new card that first exists in the world of Magic, there are usually 4 different eras. The first one being when the card is officially previewed. Remember, it's not a spoiler at all. It doesn't have anything to do with spoilers. It's a marketing plan, all right? Cards are assigned to major community people, and they are told that they have exclusivity for 24 hours and stuff like that, all right? So cards are previewed, all right? Then there's a moment where a certain card is marked by people, anyone playing, as toxic. Then a card is released and becomes legal, and then there's the first scheduled announcement of Duel Commander rules updates. Well, we do every 2 months at the time of filming this video, at the end of each odd month. If you think that the card is or should be banned before it officially gets previewed for the first time, damn, you're a bloody genius. I mean, actually, I'll show you how to do so in the next slides. If you do it when before the card is marked as people as toxic, people will say, wow, that decision is totally dumb, right? You're just going completely hysterized. We haven't even had the time to speak about it. So people will say, what? Why are they banning it? Why is it banned already? Some people will not even have the time to read the card and mark it as toxic. It's like, what? I didn't even think about the card. Then people know the card, but they say, hey, wait. We never tested the card, right? So we never really truly knew. This is the necessity of experience. You have this with newborn and children. You know what I mean. When you have children, you say, please don't push the vase out of the table. It's gonna fall and crash. Don't do it. And the children keep pushing. Don't play next to the glass table. You're gonna break it. Don't play with that inside. Don't do this. Don't do that. And you have to repeat and repeat and repeat. But the thing is, the children have not experienced yet being wrong, being blamed, being yelled at, whatever, because they did something really bad, breaking anything, and facing the value of what they have destroyed, like realizing they have destroyed something. And this is something we all do as adults. We don't vanish that away when we just grow up. We need to first take a hit in the face to know that something is actually harming. Until you haven't had your finger hammered by the hammer while planting nails, you think like it's not really harmful. And when you do that, you say, okay, now you know. And the next time you want to pin a nail in the plank in wood, you're gonna be more careful and say, all right, I remember. My brain remembers this experience. So you have this perpetual feeling of having said, we never tested the card. And then you have the opposite, which is, wow, why hasn't it been banned before? Like, the card is legal and people are actually bringing it to tournaments and it's legal. So people say, whoa, and they're gonna lose to the cards. Like, it's an elephant in the room. It's a dangerous thing. You know about it, you heard about it, and sometimes at some point you're gonna face it on a tournament, like, and it's going to destroy you, and you're gonna like, I don't get it. It was so obvious that it should be banned before. And then, if you let one scheduled announcement pass without banning the card, you basically got completely tilted out reactions, like, I'm quitting this. All right, this is just overly. This is, I don't know. Like, people are making bets, public stakes, public stances. They have takes, and they say, if they don't do this, if they don't ban this, either they're stupid, either I am. And at some point, if the card doesn't get banned, people just feel stupid because they say, hey, I was expecting this to happen. I was expecting this to happen. With every single day, I was thinking, it's gonna be banned, it's gonna be banned, it's gonna be banned, it's gonna be banned. And when we hit the brakes and we hit the scheduled announcement and it's not banned, you get a complete tilt. Like, people suddenly make so much public stances that they are afraid to pass for dumb people or something. I don't know, but they take it personally, you see? And the thing is, these two guys here, they deny completely each other. When you have a card that's being banned, whether it is during this period or this one, people just tilt on this position and they usually completely ignore what the people say on the other side. Like, some people, we never tested it, it was banned before being legal. And then some people say, yeah, it was banned because it was stupid. But they will not listen to each other's arguments because rationally this is not compatible. Same goes for the other way around, when you want to make something back to legal. So you have, again, 4 timings. You can make something legal and it's going to completely warp the metagame. It's going to change everything that's played. Then you can make it illegal again, but it's going to be silently pulling down other decks that just are going to cease to exist. But you won't see them and you can say, oh, it's just fashion, it's just time goes on, you know, decks go in and out. No, they don't. They were good decks, but something you made legal completely buried the rest. And then you got the moment when cards are made legal again, but they actually generate pre-sideboarding, because we don't have sideboarding and adaptation to Duel Commander. The only way you can adapt is to think about what's going to be in your tournament you're going to play and include preemptively cards that should affect something that is going to happen most likely, and drowned into 100 cards, that is a huge number of things. If you don't have a way to find it in your cards, there's a huge chance that you can introduce special, very efficient cards into your deck that you will not have the time to see before you lose to some polarizing decks. And then there's a moment when something could be, this is not mandatory, legal again and just in the average good, like Zur the Enchanter, for example. Legal again and nobody cares about. Which is cool because there is a very powerful card, but it's fine. So usually if you make the card legal again, people will just completely tilt. Like, I don't understand. Who told you to do that? Like, usually we got 10,000 of our problems. I didn't have this in mind, but you did it. This is my thought process. I have card A, B, C, D, E in mind, and I think the next announcement is going to be here because I want to make bets on announcements. So you start your own tilt. You're making bets, sports bets on announcements. I mean, what are you doing? Betting money? I don't know. But it doesn't come, and instead, card F comes to the announcement and gets legal again. And you're, what? Why? And you don't understand. You got no understanding because it's not connected to your thought. Then you've got the reaction, typical reaction that says, I don't know why, but I really miss the state of Commander something like a few years ago in 2023, so 2016, 2014. Yeah, it was better. And then you've got simply a feeling that it's just not super interesting. Like you're playing it, but you don't miss anything. It's just like, yeah, it's a bad flavor. And then, if you don't change anything, you might think that at some point it's going to be solved, and therefore too sclerotic. But do you see on the top there is another line here that goes all the way, every time, all the time. And it's what I call the unbanned mosh pit. Typically taking the form of any unbans. You know the question, any unbans? Like it was a quantity of something. Like you don't want something specific to happen. You don't want a card that you have thought about or anything else. You're just asking for unbans. Like it was a quantity of something. Like it was a quantity of, I don't know what, it's ice cream. Can we have ice cream? Yeah, but you only like 3 or 4 flavors, right? So which one you like? Oh, I only like vanilla and chocolate. So why didn't you say so? Because we have 10,000 flavors here. And do you want like pistachio and mint? Oh, no. So it's not any ice cream. You want specific ice cream. And it's the same for unbans. You got any unbans? And people just don't really read the announcement. They don't care about what we do. They just want things to be legal again, including if it really condemns and blows out Duel Commander and nobody gives the time to build decks. Nobody wants to organize a tournament anymore. Guess what? This is more or less what happened to Magic the Gathering Online with the introduction of 1 versus 1 Commander in 2018. Might change in the future, but for now, this is what went to something super hyped to something super forgotten about. There's not even an active person playing a deck at the moment right now. You see, that's the danger. If you just negate the thinking and the years of thinking just by saying, I want to play with fire. I want to play with fire. I want to experience fire. Does fire burn? I don't care. Give me some fire. Here's my hand. I'm going to burn myself. And when I'm burned, I'm like, all right, you're right. Fire burns. Thank you. I learned something. And usually you expect the adults to tell the children that fire burns and they should really avoid it, because for some things like car accidents, jumping off a cliff, burning yourself completely, you might not have second chances. You might condemn yourself and your life. And if you do that with Duel Commander, you might condemn the life of Duel Commander. So you have to be very, very, very specific. If you don't know what you're talking about specifically, like you just don't have any very specific thing in mind, don't ask for that. You probably need to think more. I'm asking that myself sometimes, but it's a review. I'm making a complete review of all the cards that should be made legal again, and then I end up with 1 or 2 or most of the time 0 actually. But you're gonna ask me, are people not really agreeing on that? There's an experience I make. There's an experience that says, I'm speaking with people when I can about Duel Commander, and I let them speak to me. I don't force them into anything. I'm not biasing the discussion. I'm just listening to people, and it's great. I love listening to people saying things. So everyone has a different understanding, a different experience. And at some point, purposely, freely, someone that you talk with is going to talk about a specific card. Mostly cards that are to be banned, but sometimes banned cards that could be legal. And what happens if you read all the places where people think about and you put this on a graph? This is what I did. I went to 4 Discord spaces, Facebook, and a couple forums that speak about Duel Commander. And I did researches. This is completely biased, and the protocol has to be cleaned out because it's impossible to target people and discussions. Like, people could speak about Black Lotus for being stupid and Black Lotus for being potentially legal again, which is most likely about being stupid. But they could speak about, for example, Mox Ember or Mox Diamond, for example, and speaking about Mox Diamond as a very good example of a card that is really too abusive, but they could also say, in the end, Mox Diamond could be legal again. So it's really hard to filter the discussions. You have to estimate and evaluate how many of the discussions are mentioning the cards for a BNR change topic, which is kind of hard. So I tried to do that, but this is really approximative. But what you see is approximative or not, nothing really gets out of the pack. On the left here, you have all the cards that are banned as commanders. And on the right, you have things that are not banned as commanders. As you see, the number of mentions is about the 100th. You see, it goes from something like 1,500 to 0 here. It's just really almost the same everywhere. We can see a couple things. This is Shorikoi Genesis Engine. So I did this starting January the 1st, 2023. So it's been 6 months now. Then we have Burrell Chief Compliance here, Geist of Sintraft, and maybe Ragavan, Nimble Pilferer, and Ceru Sanctum here. As you can guess, these cards are pretty strong, so most of the time the mentions are about them being banned recently. So most of the discussions are somehow semantically about making them legal again or banning them, but they mostly discuss about the bans, the changes themselves, than the necessity of a change. So if you remove that, actually you would flatten all of this, and you can see clearly that if you're thinking about something that obviously needs to change, nobody really seems to be agreeing with you. People are thinking about way different things. So be careful about that next time. I will give you a little hint about things that could change though, because as we saw, we could have specific ways to target what could be or could not be legal generically. So let me tell you how it works. Before 2007, there was no Duel Commander, and before 2011, there was no Commander. It was EDH, right? So we have Magic the Gathering, and we have material, cards, tokens, whatever, which is what we play with, and rules, which is how we play Magic the Gathering. Then we have the novel material, the anything that was a novelty, everything that was brand new, that was added on top. New rules, new materials. Hey, look, the ring tempts you now. Whatever you want it to be at the time I'm speaking and making this conference. Then we had the official judging and tournaments, which is how now do we expand the world of playing Magic when it comes to being social and having competition. Right. And then we had a fan-based game that was called Elder Dragon Highlander that has the rules, only the rules. And then Duel Commander was born out of Elder Dragon Highlander, and it also has the rules. But as Duel Commander has its own rules, sometimes we had to have specific judges and tournaments rules, or at least recommendations. But now, what you see is that Magic the Gathering since 2011 still has its base material and rules. But now it's also included Commander as a format and not as a game. It's included into the game development. And of course, we are still here, slightly handing over Commander, because we are depending on Commander. Whatever you play with Duel Commander right now is based on Commander. And most of the cards, whether we like it or not, are explained by the Commander rules that are incorporated in the comprehensive rules. So we still have our judging and tournaments on top of it. But the thing is now Wizards of the Coast has been printing new material on top of that. So they just straight force, they don't contradict Duel Commander, they just straight force it down, right? And thing is, Wizards of the Coast is always right. We cannot be right against them, okay? So the judging and the tournaments are still on top of that. And this is how we flipped some kind of a sandwich where now things are behaving way differently. And this means only one thing. We are standing in the void, handing over the wire, hoping that Wizards of the Coast will not print anything completely breaking down and creating a super bad playing experience when it comes to Duel Commander. we're just crossing our fingers. That's what we do right now. This is a very uncomfortable place, but you have to realize we are not basing a game on top of another game where we just overlapped everything. Now the game itself overlapped us. Okay, this is the explanation. Now, a little more statistics, but you're gonna find interesting. If we just target now the number of cards into the whole Magic the Gathering world that mention commander outside the name, not like something commander of something else, all right? We just set that apart. When a card mentions explicitly commander or command zone, whether it's legendary or not, look at this graph. This is growing, which means now, as we saw, Wizards of the Coast is spreading things that actually take care of the commander mechanics right now that used to be built on top of Magic. Now they are incorporated into Magic. And this is the hardest thing to understand, so I'm going to explain. This is 100% stacked things of the sum of all the cards that were banned after the first year they were released, and among which you see on the bottom the cards of which I was speaking during the last slide. Okay, the cards that mention commander and command zone, and the proportions they represent out of the total Duel Commander banned and restricted list. Okay, without the structural list like silver border or anything. Okay, so if we just take the specific BNR card by card, this is the graph you see. And you see, if we didn't stop in 2022 with the partner update, we could actually have way more things being banned right now. We went from 0 to 45%. We could go up to 50%, if not more, right now. So you could be worried about it, for example, being a planeswalker with a static ability that says this could be your commander. But if you look at this list, there's been only 19 of them, and one artifact in the name of Shuriken Genesis Engine. And if you look at this list, most of them are completely alright. Only Shurikai, Dihada, Minsk and Boo, and the rest have been banned ever since then, right? So what you see is that if you remove all these cards and you keep what is left, you are only left with something like about 14 different cards that have nothing in common to sum up why they are broken or abusive or to be banned. You can more or less say that Zergobo Striker is close to Rigavan, but that's pretty much the only thing. Everything else is completely different here for very different reasons. But actually, Duel Commander has existed for something like 15 years now, so that means we will only have one banned commander per year. That would be really safer, right? So you could say, yeah, but it's due to the multiplayer aspect. So you could ban all the multiplayer sets, but multiplayer sets also have completely legal reprints. So you cannot tell people not to play multiplayer sets. So you say, if a card has a specific effect, like an opponent at random, yeah, maybe. But you see here, only Vital Smasher the Fierce falls into that category. The rest is completely alright in Duel Commander. It could be one of your opponents. Can you spot how many cards are concerned now? Edric, Spymaster of Threst, Maddening Hex, and Jiska Thrice Reborn, mostly. Doesn't really go into the efficient zone, right? Because forbidding all the rest, it would just be useless noise and overhead. So you could also be targeting cards with structural things. Like if you just go by groups of cards, which is all the cards, for example, that use that keyword. You say, all right, partner is now banned, and then Friends Forever gets printed. And then something else gets printed. And then another, and you get an endless list of things that are quite heavy to remember for the people. Like you are on a tournament, and how do you quickly know if a card that you're facing is legal or not? Do you have to call a judge all the time? Is that going to be fair? Is it good or not? You don't know. You could say, all right, we're just going to ban silver border, and then boom, silver borders are removed and replaced with this small little acorn holofoil in the middle. Or you could say, you know what, Monarch is abusive, let's remove the Monarch. But also you can enter the dungeon. All right, you can remove both. But then, suddenly, you have Initiative, which is a mix of both. So it becomes quite complex. And then the problem is if you go one by one and you name the reason why you're banning cards, people have a temptation and the bias of ordering them, sorting them. You're going to sort cards by the most dangerous to the least dangerous, the most toxic to the least toxic. And first of all, you have to agree on the list, which is going to be very complex as time goes by. And as you saw, not everyone is going to agree on your list. So the question is, whether you rank it from the least significant to the most significant, or the other way, whatever you want to be, where you're going to put things in a linear way according to only one metric. And that one metric means you have a rule with X coordinates and you just set a cursor. So you say, where's the cursor? Too dangerous, too dangerous, too dangerous, too dangerous, too dangerous. Wait, maybe the limit is here. So sometimes the limit is clear, sometimes it's not, and most of the time you are just summing up all these cards just like, it's a card that generates 1 mana for 0, which is more than this. It has, all of these cards are completely different, actually. Same goes for this commander, same goes for these spells that require having your commander on the battlefield and paying no mana alternatively if you want to. How do you do that? At some point you're going to make some sort of ranking and people are going to get exhausted. Like usually they're going to say, you know what, just ban them all. All right, I'm fine with that. I don't agree with you which one is the most dangerous or more boring or whatever, or the one that I like playing personally, but don't tell the other ones. You see, that's the problem. And if you go like that, you can go infinitely with a number of complexity. You can say, all right, let's just put a straight comparison. You can have multiple layers and directions of metrics. Like, okay, Black Lotus is similar in some price, in some reason to Duel Lotus. That is also similar to Lotus Bloom, but not the same way as Lion's Eye Diamonds, which is actually closer to Diamond Lion, but less efficient. But also, you could have Mana Vault, which is closer to this, but Mana Vault is a small updated version of Green Monolith, which is actually not the same, but Basalt Monolith goes close to it, and you can go infinitely like that. So you start with a principle, generating too much mana for no particular cost, or too often, or being a combo engine, or whatever you want it to be, infinite resources or easy resources, and you end up with a completely broken set of things that you're never going to agree on, because until someone somewhere finds a way to abuse a specific card, for example, Lotus Field. Maybe Lotus Field is completely too toxic for Duel Commander. We don't know it yet. So you could also say, for example, you should not search for a card because searching for a card in 100 cards is not very practical, which is a good idea to say so. But if you say this contradicts the principle of singleton, then you have a proximity problem, like how different is Entomb, is Diabolic Intent, is the Legendary Scroll, and you just get an infinite number of possibilities, and I did not even include a hundredth of the card searching named like tutor or whatever you wanted to call it. This is not a tutor at all, this is a card that searches, but card search is going to be really complex. Should we include the fetch lands from Onslaught on this list, for example? And this goes infinitely, you see? So, to just sum up things, to just tell you about the complexity of this. You can choose to ban cards individually in a group of cards that have a specific common criteria or a structural approach. So, what I said is I put the positive and negative aspects of everything sorted and summed up here in this chart. So if you want to have an impact on future rules, like if you have structural changes, this, I told you a few slides ago, is how you can actually predict that some new cards that we'll be printing one day will be banned even before they are announced. This is how you do so. Because if you target a mechanic, if you target an effect that a card does, you can tell already it will not work. Like if any new card is printed that says, like a new wish that says you can find something outside the game, This is working right now. You don't even need to question yourself. People will ask, new people will ask, excuse me guys, is this new wish doing anything in Commander? And people say no, just like the other ones. So you don't need to have a rules update. New announcement, nothing, you see? But also, is if you just got a group, you got a possible need of upgrading, because at some point, upgrading, as we saw, is going to be structural, like forbidding partners, and then friends forever, and then another one, partners with, and then another, and another, and another, and at some point you say, all right, we're gonna make a generic structural rules for multiple objects in the starting command zone, whatever you call it to be. The hardest thing is to target it. And if you got an individual thing, then you are stuck to having a full printing review and a full comparison every time. If you have Wizards of the Coast orientation, if you go structural, it's unhandled to strongly predictably handled. Like, for example, we said that we can only have one object in a command zone that can be played. And guess what? We did that before the background, choose a background thing was out. So we need never print anything. We never had to say anything about choose a background, because choose a background was preemptively handled, not banned, handled. And if you use something with a grouped approach, it could be unhandled to moderately predictably handled. That's not going to be very efficient. Like partner is banned. All right. And at some points, new partners are completely broken, but they are already banned. So, okay, why not? But not friends forever, for example. This is moderately handled. And if you go to an individual choice here, the problem is if Wizards go one way and pushes it to the maximum without disturbing multiplayer gaming, but we are completely affected every time in Duel Commander, the number of items on the BNR is going to increase. And there's no choice in that. So we cannot do anything about that. If we just go cards are banned one by one, and Wizards go completely against the sane things in Duel Commander, it will be doomed to have a 200, 300, 400, 500 cards being banned. Alright? So the BNR length, in short, will be shorter if we use structural, shorter if we use grouped, and longer if you use individual things. Of course, it will be longer if we just choose more structural arguments and more grouped rules, okay? The readability on the other side will be barely harder. You just have to open the page, get the list, it's sorted alphabetically, all the websites are using Scryfall is using the DC ban list, it's copying everything and it's fine. It's fine. You just have more cards and you just know or don't know that they have been banned. But if you use the grouped approach, you need to remember a specific rule and apply this rule to the card you're reading, but not to its name, but to its text box. So it's quite harder. And if you use a structural approach where you say cards that do certain things do not function or are forbidden or whatever, it's going to be really harder because it makes you remember these times not the text box, not the name, but game rules, which is really harder. So the legality guessing, as I said, is going to be barely harder here, quite harder, and really harder. So you have a price to pay. And the overhead, which is the number of cards that are not really dangerous, but that will be banned for the same reason, goes from none if you choose only the cards you want one by one. That's the advantage, it's really clear. But if you, for example, ban all the partners, what happens to the partners that cost 5 or 6 that are completely unplayable? They just get banned too, for no reason. And if you do the same thing with a structural approach, like for example, banning everything that is a commander in the command zone that allows multiple commanders and that costs less than 3, for example. If you do that, it's really harder to guess, but the overhead for people is quite nothing, okay? So you go from none to huge, depending on how you write your rules. And the thing is, for the future prints, which is having less cards mentioned into new announcements, for example, you will have a complete unhandling. If you go card by card, any new card has to be analyzed. You see, full printing review. So you have to have one. If you have a grouped approach, you will have it more or less handled until sibling rules like friends forever and partner arrive. Okay? If you have this, Usually, until the rule is expanded, you will be okay until the end of time, even if Wizards of the Coast stops going that way. Then you have the problematic of comparison bias. If you have a structural approach, there is no bias of comparison. If you have a grouped approach, you have a light comparison bias, but if you go one by one, people will always spend the time arguing that A is better than B, but less good than B, but better than C, but C sometimes is better than A, and they will spend all that time doing very complex math that go nowhere. And then the thing is, if people get some cards banned, they will search for substitutes. Like, A is banned, but isn't B very close to A? Can I play B? How much for a deck is exploration good when Fastbound is banned? Is it comparable? To some extent, yes. To some extent, no. So you will have this kind of comparison and the search for substitute, like, alright, can I keep the same deck list but only change the card that's been banned? Was it centric? Usually it is, but was it centric? Can I just replace it with something else? In some decks, the answer will be yes, freely. And some decks will have, oh no, this was a structural card. Your whole deck goes to the dustbin. So the search for substitutes is going to be heavy when you go one by one, and light because people will say, oh, I need another card that does, oh no, the whole complete mechanic is banned. So I don't need to search for. I know I'm not going to find it, right? And then in the end, you've got the feelings of you, the player base, how you receive that when the announcement is published. When you have an individual ban, individual change, card by card, you know that as soon as the announcement is read by everyone, appreciated or not, you know that every new print for Wizards of the Coast is going to be focusing people, having people focused the same way on the same thing. Like sometimes you could ban a card and the next print is exactly going against your ban. Like, boo, there's another card that does exactly the same thing. So if you have a grouped approach, this is very soothing because people know exactly and precisely when and how to identify a new card. Wow, we have a new card that gets banned because it mentions, for example, the command zone. Take the text in English. Does it say command zone? Yes, it does. So fine, it's banned. You don't need to, so you can plan, you can think, like as soon as a new card is announced, you don't need any discussion, you don't need any talk, you don't need anything around you. Just you, yourself, alone, at home, reading and discovering a new card, you know it's immediately not legal, for example. Or legal, for example. You don't need to ask questions. If it's already banned, you're fine. You just go up. But the thing is, if you have a too broad structural approach, it's going to be soothing, but people are going to have to think like, I think it's banned, but I'm still in need for some community approval. I'm going to ask people around this. So you see, you have different approaches that lead to very different results, and all of these have advantages and drawbacks. And just to finish this, I just want to remind you that you are part of something much bigger when it comes to Duel Commander. This is the number of visits we had on mtgdc.info for the last year. Sliding year. It was from April 2022 to April 2023. Remember, this is applying to GDPR European regulations, so the regulation makes some people refuse cookies and some people have paranoid browsers, so you don't know everything about everyone when they do visit your website. But Google is quite good at handling these things, so this is pretty accurate. As you see, we have people all over the world, and it's pretty cool, you know, yeah, pretty good visits from all over the world. The top countries are, as usual, United States, first of all, followed by France, then Brazil, Philippines, Germany, Canada, and what they call Czechia, which is Czech Republic. And you might wonder why people come to this site. You're thinking United States people could just be mistaking for Commander 1v1 stuff. They don't really do, actually. If you look at the bounce rate, the engagement time here, it's close to the same. They just spend the same time, slightly like 10 seconds less, 10, 12 seconds less. So they actually are interested. So no, United States people really want to learn about Duel Commander. Really, for real. Regarding Facebook, it's down to a minimum. It's down to we don't really use Facebook a lot anymore, and I think Facebook and Meta itself has condemned itself. Some things like the trust people have to Meta to after the Cambridge Analytica affair and stuff like that. Yeah, it's been more or less condemned. We have apparently 5% women, which is still not enough. We're not doing anything bad against that, but it's rather in the hands of Wizards of the Coast for now. So we hope that will change, but it is changing, I think, slightly going upwards, but still very disappointing, I would say. But yeah, so you see more or less the same countries with Facebook. Top visiting city on Facebook location is Sao Paulo, so it's pretty good. And Lima in second place and Quetzon third place. So yeah, nice to see you guys. Regarding the Discord audience is really going up. We have more and more engagement and conversations all the time. People are mostly French speakers, but not only, they're usually mostly desktop, not only mobile, not really mobile and stuff, but mostly desktop. And what you see here is that most people actually get a Discord and register on Discord just to join us, mostly. So that's pretty nice for what we have. So as a technical coordinator, I could say overall the website is getting a lot of audience. Facebook has declined to a stable minimum. Discord is a little on the rise month after month. The tournament reports, as we saw, are strongly rising. I still remind you that Discords need you and also us. How about just hosting this kind of panels on Discord more often? I don't know. Could be a thing. YouTube and Twitch actually are still delegated to third party. You guys do that way better than we do, so it's not really a topic among us. And all the other networks like Instagram, TikTok, Mastodon, Twitter, Reddit, whatever, are little to not really relevant to Duel Commander communication right now. So don't forget that we have a repository, if you have an organization, a shop, anything that really recurringly organizes Duel Commander stuff. Also for online social media, for people who make video content, analysis, tech lists, games, whatever, even coverage, whatever. We redesigned the rules recently. They haven't changed, they just got more clear and clarified, and thank you for the people who just sent us feedback, by the way. We have an FAQ, frequently asked questions, that we can answer. So if you find something that is okay with the rules but not really obvious for everyone and you think it's a good idea, just send us a message so we can add this to the FAQ. That will help everyone and you will have made the world a better place. We have a quick start guide for beginners if you don't know where to start and how to help people start. If you don't do that yourself, you can invite us for interviews. We never refuse. I think we have never refused an interview. We share your 100+ players tournaments on our Discord too. We read what you write most of the time. We are 19 right now in the committee. That makes a lot of people, and we read everything you say. At most, we're trying to. So don't be disappointed. There's a high chance that someone somewhere in the world is reading you. That's also what we have, regional coordinators and stuff like that. We have TCG events that I created last year. So if you want help to host your tournaments for free, just come in contact with me, get in touch with me, and you will have a platform and an account for free where you can put infinite events on. That's pretty interesting, I think. We have MTG Top 8, of course, if you want to organize a tournament, so you can submit your deck list and the people who just performed correctly, so you can help the whole people around you. We have the Ask Community form on the website. If you have questions, don't ask short-term questions like, why is not this banned, or why is it this banned? What happens if the next announcement has it changed? Well, your question is just completely deciduous and just useless now. So we're trying to have visionary questions and stuff like that. And don't forget, we also want you and have you and helps share brewing your deck list on Discord. So if you need help, you can get help on Discord with lots of people around the world. And as usual, to conclude this, Wine from the World, we just exist thanks to Wizards of the Coast, who actually makes this amazing, great game that Magic the Gathering is. You know, I've been playing for 21 years, 22 years myself. The game itself is 30 years old this year, and it's kind of a success. Not everything is that old, so that really succeeded. So yeah, shouts out to Wizard of the Coast in Hasbro. That was so far so good. Really an amazing experience, and the game is really rich and interesting. Thanks a lot to all the judges who spend their time and dedicate their days doing so. To you who played Duel Commander. If there are no players, it's just a homemade and homebrew game rules that we play all together. And thanks to the tournament organizers that not only organize tournament but dedicate also a lot of their time creating leagues, organizing things, answering to people. I've been a TO myself, and really this is time consuming and exhausting. So thanks a lot to everyone here in the room, to everyone who makes that. So to infinity and beyond. Thanks a lot from all of us to all of you. And I think I will see you again in 2024 for the next panel. I already have lots of things to say, and this was already 2 hours and a half long, so it's kind of long actually. So I'm not going to add way much more per panel, so we'll keep content for the years to come. I'll see you up ahead. See you next time. Take care of yourselves and enjoy your games. See you up ahead.